the Teach Pitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for Teach Pitch, a global community of tens of thousands of subscribers from over 205 countries who all have a desire to improve the state of education in this world. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of our subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, fashion designers, hospital builders, non-profit founders, authors, journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That is what we are going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo de Pap and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us in this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
First thing is my son, he's 10 and I love him really much. And I don't want him to learn for jobs that will not be here in 10 years from now. And when I talk to these schools, I did a lot of talks the last 5-6 years for schools in Europe. I see frustration. I see teachers who really want to change, but they don't know where to start. And I see a lot of passion to get it going to the next level.
A very happy Thursday, everyone. Thursday, February 10th. And we are very proud to bring you yet another episode, and more particular, episode 33. And for this episode, I have interviewed a futurist. And I must say that sounds as exciting as it is. When I started this interview, I was a little bit skeptical. Because if you go out there and call yourself a futurist or a trend watcher, then there is something kind of oracly about you. There is a certain sentiment with you that says, I have an idea on how the future will evolve. I know what tomorrow will bring. I know if it's going to be blue or yellow or gray. And here are my ideas about that. And I think that's fair. I think you can say whatever you want to say. But if you go out there and kind of give your take on the world and talk about that, then I also think that comes with some responsibility. And I was very happy that I could speak to my next guest about that, about the things that he has seen, because he's been doing it for quite a while. His name is Richard van Hooijdonk, and he's a futurist from the Netherlands. He's guests on many TV shows. And it was very nice to kind of talk to him about the things that he saw, but also the things that in his career as a futurist, he basically hadn't seen correctly. And I thought that was very interesting to talk about both ends. Another thing that I like about Richard is that he's not only someone who talks the talk, but also walks the walk, because he had certain chips implemented in his body that allow him to this day to be able to open his door, to be able to open his car all automatically. So he doesn't need a key. He does it with a chip, which he has implemented in his hand. And I do think that's kind of making yourself your own experiment, right? He believes that lots of people will have these chips implemented in the future. I don't know. I really don't know if we will or if we won't. But Richard has done this. And that gives him some additional credits in my book. I really enjoyed talking to him, not only because of his ideas, but also the way how he was speaking. He's very hyperactive. He has loads of ideas and changes trains of thought very easily. So it was very nice to kind of just have this storm of a conversation with him. So I sincerely hope you will enjoy it. A little update on the running. So in the previous episode, I said I'm, preparing for the half marathon of Inverness. I did some runs, but not as many runs as I would have liked. So I did a couple of 5Ks and need to be more strict. So need to do a little bit more to get myself in shape. Whenever I do the run, I feel amazing. I feel, ready for battle. So would like to very much advise you to get out there as well, get active, because it helps you every step of the way. You have a clear mind and you are at your sharpest physically as well as mentally. Enough preaching. I hope you will have a great Thursday and great rest of week, and that you will enjoy this next episode of the Teach Pitch podcast. Richard van Hooijdonk, the Hyperactive Futurist.
This podcast is brought to you by Mindstone, a platform that lets you build courses curated from the best online content, helping your students learn faster and remember more. Check out mindstone.com and find out how you can get started. We're so happy to be partnering with Hooijdonk, an interactive video platform that enables teachers and students to easily create amazing clickable videos for learning. Check out hooijdonk.com, that's HIHAHO.com, for more information and your free starter account. A big thank you to our friends at Zeus Maths Challenger, the only puzzle that effectively boosts your numeracy, critical thinking, and brain power. Go to czeusspuzzles.com, that is spelled CZEUS puzzles.com, to get your brain buzzing. We are so excited to be working with the team Learning Ladders, the only platform that provides assessment that goes way beyond tracking to effectively support teaching and learning for EYFS, primary, and secondary settings. Go to learningladders.info to find out more.
Yes, and here we are back with the Teach Pitch podcast, and today I have the exquisite honor to be talking to a futurist. I should actually say trend watcher and futurist. So someone who has made it his personal expertise to know what is coming, and that looks at specific elements and see how they're growing. And I'm very excited it makes some time available to talk to me, because I know he's on the road very often. He does loads of talks. And specifically now we have the World Economic Forum going on in Davos, which is this gathering of experts from all over the world, heads of state, lots of big hitters who come together. And my guest is also a speaker there. And he speaks a lot about how knowledge and technology basically synergize, how they can come together, and also advises a lot on how technology could be abused on the level of crime. So think of cybercrime, and more specifically, virtual reality and crime. I'm too excited, so I should first say a very warm welcome to you, Richard van Hooijdonk. Hi.
Thank you so much. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing great. I was just so excited. We were just talking before I started the interview about cybercrime and kind of the metaverse and all these exciting things.
Magic topics, right? Magic topics. Yeah.
Magic topics, yeah. And this is a show without a visual, but to the listeners, if you see what I see, when Richard speaks about this, he gets a little sparkle in his eyes. Kind of, I think he is quite excited talking about these topics. Yeah, let's start right away, if that's okay with you, with the World Economic Forum. And more specifically, you're talking this year on a panel on crime, and specifically virtual reality and crime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit more what that is all about?
Yeah, the reason why the World Economic Forum and also police forces asked me to talk about this topic, they want to get some more information about how to use virtual reality to protect countries. But we all know that virtual reality is used by criminals to actually exercise attacks. So that's one. And if you use virtual reality together with sensors and cameras and stuff, you can do amazing things. So they want to know more about that topic. The other thing is that we will be using virtual reality a lot more in the future, for example, within the metaverse. So we will become part of a new universe using virtual mixed reality, augmented reality. And we might commit crimes like killing people or, abusing people in these new worlds. And we need to get kind of a common sense about what it means for, criminal offense and for law enforcement. So that's the other thing. Mm-hmm. And both topics are, the same thing, virtual reality to be used in the classroom. For example, one of the teachers I met during one of my shows, he says, I will never use VR to explain how the world is moving, And so he uses a globe to show places on Earth. And so that's one of the reasons why I think we should explain how VR could actually be used in all kinds of worlds. Police, crime protection, but also education. So it's a really, really interesting topic.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, education and more specifically education trends, because I understand you and your team are investing a lot of time and energy in that at the moment. But before we do so, I would like to go back to the very beginning, because when I read about you, and there are a couple of very interesting things about you, one of them is that you have a chip implemented in your hand. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a real addiction. The thing is, that was one of my ideas. If you talk about it, I think you should be part of it, right? So I decided to have a chip injected. I think this was around 4 years ago, into my hands, trying out it's RFID. So I connected my car, my home, to do some experiments. But after a couple of years, I got quite addicted. So I had another one implanted in my leg. So it's actually, I now have 2 chips. The third one is coming. It's actually a way for me to experiment with technology inside. And that's quite interesting. Right now it's actually something that is used in a practical way, like opening doors, opening cars. The last one I had, the second one, also stores my Bitcoin wallets, which is also quite funny. And I remember I did a talk, I think it was in Belgium, and there was a guy, I think he was 14, 15, and he was chasing me with an RFID reader because he wanted to read my RFID chip. So this shows something about those young kids. They're really into these topics.
Yeah. Right
now we are looking at brain chips, which is also quite interesting, because a lot of people who lost their arms and legs, they are able to, they have these implants in their brains. And I've seen people crying because they could move their hands and arms again. So I think there's a great, great future ahead of, my son, he suffers from epilepsy right now. He's quite ill. And I would beg him to have such a chip, in the future. So I think, technology inside is something that we all will be using to protect life.
Yeah. And just for me to get an understanding, how mainstream is the implantation of such chips at the moment? It's not, right? Okay.
No, there are some crazy guys like me who experiment with these chips. It's kind of a little surgery thing. So you need to cut it and then you need to put it in just under your skin. So it takes some time and pain and stuff. But the thing is, these chips will become smaller and smaller. And so in the future, it's quite painful, right? And I don't know. For now, we don't know what happens to my health, because it seems all safe because it's in glass. So the chip is packed within glass. But it's not mainstream at the time. It's something that's experimental.
Okay, so you're a real life guinea pig. People are just looking at you like, how is this going to go? How is this working? Yeah. But kudos to you, because if you're going to call yourself a futurist or a trend watcher, you're actually putting your money where your mouth is and saying, well, let me see how this plays out. Let me see what this works. So, it's a very interesting experiment, to say the least. And good to hear that 4 years in, it has brought you joy, right? It hasn't been the opposite.
Yeah. But it's also part of the bigger story. If you want to tell a story about the future of healthcare, it's important to live that future. If you want to tell stories if you're inspired about the future of agriculture, for example, or another topic, also as a teacher, if you're inspired about mathematics, right, live the future of mathematics, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's something that should be incorporated in everything you do.
Yeah. Very good advice. What got you all started into this? Like, how does one decide, I'm going to be a trend watcher, or I'm going to become a futurist? How did that go for you?
Yeah, when you can do anything in life, the only way out is to become a trend watcher. Now, in the end, I did some stuff in the past, right? I joined boards of insurance companies and banks and stuff. I had advertising agencies, commercial companies, founded them, stole them. But in the end, there's one question that's how can I be part of something that's more exciting than the daily actually stuff I did? I mean, if you're part of a board or part of a company, people tell you what to do. If you are part of, for example, your own company, you can actually decide what to do yourself. Mm-hmm. So actually, when I was young, I started, reading scout books and stuff. I love digging into things, right, to the max. And that gave me a lot of, joy. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think it was 13 years, I discovered I had severe ADHD, which is hyperactive something in the brain, which is a big problem, but it could also be a huge positive thing. I mean, problem-wise, I need to meditate at least 2 times a day to stay cool, which is not a good thing. When we have an interview, it's really hard for me to say nothing, right? Because I have so many ideas, and that's something that happens into the brain. I can't do anything about it. It's just ADHD. Positive thing is that if you use it the right way, you're able to think faster, dig into stuff more often. So I decided to do something different because my brain was too active. I was too distracted because if you are in a board meeting, for example, after 15 minutes, you know where it's going at, right? I mean, people talking about the same shit every day, having the same political games every day. If you see the whole concept of boards and companies, you get distracted pretty fast. So I decided to think about something bigger. I did political studies and then we had the rise of social media coming. I think I was 16, 18, 20 coming, and then I built the first model of social media, marketing 3.0 models, all kinds of innovational things that were new. And that's actually what I liked to do. But in the end, there's a point that you want to be part of something bigger than, social media and making money for companies. And then when you dig into the future, it's so big. I mean, if you look around within industries, it's amazing what's happening out there. And at the time, I also saw that companies, they were not able to pick up the fast pace of change. People were hardly able to speed up because they're not made for change. People are not made for change. People are made to do the same stuff every day and again and again and again. And when you see that pattern of doing the same things every day, there's something starts in me kind of like distraction. So then I thought about, I want to dive into the future. And then it started.
I'm just curious because you described yourself as a young boy being hyperactive, kind of dealing with all those things. Are you from an entrepreneurial family? Because you started introducing like I set up companies and whatever. Some people, they just get their first job. But you said like, no, I started companies. So you had a very entrepreneurial nature. Was that genetic in your case, or is that something that's just...
My father, he's a Navy SEAL guy, so he was under command his whole life. So it's not from him. My mother too. So I think it came from the really strong feeling to build my own ideas. If you look around and you're really passionate about something and people don't see it, or they want to, drive the same circle every day, you want to step out of the circle. Yeah. At the same time, if you have a really strong idea yourself or a strong passion to build your own concepts, there's only way to do it yourself is just to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I think the ADHD, the passion, the fact that I actually decided to focus, helped me to get the trust that I could do that, Yeah. There's also something like, you talked about my eyes, playing and being passionate. That's also something I actually developed in the early years. So because I had a teacher, Mr. Leo, and every Friday and Monday, he talked about really exciting stuff. And we all hated mathematics and language and stuff. But his stories gave us so much power and so much energy. So I think that's also a story about education. We need more passionate people, but you can only be passionate if someone inspires you to become passionate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it was already done when 10, 15 years. This is where it started.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, I took my direction.
Yeah. Who is your example? Because there are other futurists out there or trend watchers. Do you have one that you say, okay, what this lady or this gentleman or this person says, that's really...
Peter Diamandis, he's from the Singularity University in the US. He has a certain flair and showtime, but again, same time, really serious message. That's a guy I really like. But there are many scientists globally, that are brilliant people, but they don't have the passion to talk about it. Actually, my job has two ways. The first part is analytical. The first thing, you need to be passionate and interested in everything around you. That's one, If you're not really curious, forget about it. Second thing is that you need to be able to analyze really deeply and ask yourself, what is happening here? And again, try to see all kinds of angles. That's the second thing. The third thing you need to have is you need to be able to explain things. I call these people explainers, right? So being able to tell a story in a way people like to hear it. So that means, there are a lot of brilliant scientists who are more brilliant than I am in understanding things, but they're not able to tell the story, right? So we need more explainers because the world is changing really fast, and we need people who are able to tell the stories in a way big crowds are able to understand and to pick up and to take action. Yeah. And I think those three qualities I was able to develop the last couple of years, the last 20, 25 years. But the thing is, if you get older, you're getting better in just a few things. In the beginning, you say, I can do everything, right? I'm the king. And then when you get older, you actually see that you're actually not good at the most things, but there are a few things you're good at. So you're specialized, focusing. And that's what I did. So I finally had a lot of companies, and I actually went deeper and more focused to actually the stuff I'm doing now, speaking and bringing the future to people. Every week I had calls of headhunter people who asked me to come into their boards and stuff, but just feel in your heart what feels good. Yeah. If it really feels good to shout out the topics you love, if your heart burns from, telling stories or doing research, follow your heart. I think that's what I learned from the past. Yeah. Don't listen too much to other people. Just follow your passion, right? That's the most important thing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now let's look at futurism in and of itself. You just mentioned, you get loads of invites to talk to people. You mentioned Interpol earlier before we started recording. When these people invite you, what do you think is their expectation in having a conversation with you? Because, just to be clear, you're of course not a fortune teller, right? You're not looking into a glass bowl and basically say, oh, here's what's going to happen. No. You are anticipating on certain things that could most likely will happen, right? And you amplify that. Is that correct?
Yeah. The one thing we do, we actually check what's going on. Maybe I can give you a good example. We know that virtual reality is running for the last 10 years, but right now we see traction. And so you can actually predict that we will have more integrated concepts. So for example, 5 years ago, I explained that PlayStation will probably add VR into their games because people want to play those live games. That's one thing. But if you actually also combine a brain chip with a VR headset, then you're able to give people their own personal vacation because you can show them images from Hawaii and get their brain in kind of a relaxed mode. That's one. So if you combine those two, which is actually what we do, you get a new world, right? We actually check all kinds of technologies like robotics, like AI and the problems with AI. And we try to look ahead, because when we have these chips, when we have the VR headset, when we have AI, man, this could happen and that could happen and that might be happening. So we try to look at the impact of combining technologies and build stories of these possible futures. So we actually share scenarios. And I mean, there's a lot of research we do. For example, one of our researchers is now getting into the depth of the future of HR, for example. So there's a lot of statistics. There's a lot of cases going on in global universities. There's a lot of innovative companies. And we try actually combine everything and then draw a conclusion. This is where we are. Yeah. And at the same time, there are a lot of people globally who also talk about their specific technology and tell their future about these technologies. So if you combine it all, that's what we do. And I think drawing lines, I mean, when I do talks for teachers or organizations, they expect to get a different vision. So they expect to get a couple of choices or scenarios. That's one. So they expect to get some real interesting content they can learn from. They can adapt their strategies on. For example, if you are an agriculture company or a factory, if you know where we're heading to, they are able to invest money into those ideas. That's one. You need to always back it up with data and figures and statistics.
So, well, two questions came to mind. One, have you ever been wrong about a trend?
I'm doing the job right now. I think it's 8 to 10 years. I mean, a lot of things that are happening right now, like the brain chip. I mean, I did a presentation in 2013, 2014, where I predicted that everyone will have a brain chip in 10 years from now, and we'll be able to have an eye implant, for example, and zoom in, zoom out, AR, VR. And actually, it just happened last year. So it did happen, but it happened last year. So a lot of stories are actually predicted, like the self-driving cars. I mean, my story is 5 years ago that we would have loads of self-driving cars right now, moving my kids to school without a driver. But it didn't happen until now. But it is happening because they're bigger structures. So sometimes we forget how the current structures within governments, economical structures, they actually block change. Yeah, there's one thing I was too positive about, which is DNA engineering, because that's something I predicted that will be earlier or already be in our healthcare system. For example, a lot of people are born being deaf or blind, and we are slowly getting into a level that we are able to solve that problem by changing the DNA, right? Yeah. So I predicted that governments would allow us to change life before we are born. And it's done 2 times, but it's still a criminal act. So it's tough. So I think I was too early with a lot of things and too positive. Usually there's been some research on how long does it take to see something happening and being implemented in organizations. That's usually 7 years. So you can be early enough, right? But the timeline was a bit positive, but that's okay. I don't think that's a problem. As long as you always back up what you do with objective information. So don't tell bullshit. That's the only thing we don't try to do.
It's good that you stick to facts and figures and statistics and what have you more. So because that's what makes the world go round. The other question I had is...
It's really risky, though. For example, I had kind of fight with people telling them that within 5 to 6 years, half of all the jobs will be taken over by robots. And people get angry. So if you tell them the facts, sometimes it's really hard for them to accept it. So that's the balance we try to have. We don't want to frighten people, but sometimes we do need to frighten people to get them waking up, right? That's something we do. Yeah.
I was wondering what something you mentioned earlier, and that all of us, of course, have been a subject to, which is the pandemic crisis.
Yeah.
And some people say that the way we are living right now, this hybrid form of, the Zoom calls and, working from home and, the complete change in office life to social contact, like the handshake going and the 3 kisses as a greeting, etc., 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 that's gone forever. So that would have an impact, in a certain way to us as a society. What's your opinion on this?
We know that this pandemic might be a really small thing that happened to us, and bigger ones are coming. I mean, when we talk to people who really know, this might be one of the smallest pandemics. But the great predictions I now get from really famous scientists and people who really know. I mean, we're all virologists right now, but they actually predict that we will have more of these bigger, impactful times. So, I mean, there are a lot of countries who are not fully vaccinated right now. So the virus could mutate pretty easily. So we need to think how to manage that concept. And we've never seen it before. I mean, the Spanish flu was a long time ago. So since then, we did not have these big pandemics. And I think we learned that we need people, and without people, people die or will be really negative about life. Mm-hmm. This will impact the economy. This will impact industries. It will impact education, especially education. So this is something we should learn from. I mean, from a practical way, it saves a lot of time. I learned that these technologies save a lot of time. And also, we will have new technologies coming up, holograms. I did a talk 3 years ago with David Bowie, and he was singing Heroes next to me as a hologram.
Yeah.
So it won't be long. I mean, right now I can buy a hologram presentation for around $50,000. So it's quite expensive, but in a couple of years, you can all see me if you want as a hologram just in front of your desk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want. So I think, but we still need the personal touch.
I mean, intuitively, I agree. We are social beings. We need each other, to better understand our own lives and to better understand the world we live in. So I don't think human contact is ever going to go. But as you already said, it's reformatting slightly, and maybe reformatting to be more effective.
And the best way to change society is to have big disasters, and or within companies to get them bankrupt. So if people can't do anything, they're radically changed. And that's also what we should avoid. But it's a reality. People will only change if it's really necessary. And for example, if you talk about meeting people, I'm reminded the discussion I had about my son. He's now 10, and he was constantly iPadding, and people were complaining about him doing that. And then there was two outcomes. The first outcome was that kids who play with their iPads are really effective, doing these new jobs. At the same time, we need his brains to think about the future. And in order to use his brains, he needs rest. He needs relaxations. Because if you rest, if you're relaxing, if you play with other kids, you learn from them, you get excited, you get relaxed. And then we have these new brain channels developing in these children that give them the new energy and the new knowledge. So we need both, right? Yeah. We need digital. We need it. Without digital, we will never survive. But we also need the brains and the children and nature and playing and fooling around.
Let's go to your passion for education now. You're investing a lot in better understanding education. Why is that important to you?
First thing is my son, he's 10, and I love him really much. And I don't want him to learn for jobs that will not be here in 10 years from now. And when I talk to these schools, I did a lot of talks the last 5-6 years for schools in Europe. I see frustration. I see teachers who really want to change, but they don't have the knowledge. They don't know where to start. And I see a lot of passion to get it going to the next level. So we started to build a information concept, which is education-trends.com. And we built a research team. It's now a team of 15, almost 17 people. And we have specific teams that study the skills of the future. So they actually collect cases, examples, formats about that topic. There's another team that does the school of the future. There's another team that does learning systems of the future. And we actually collect everything that happens around the world, because a lot of these things are crap and not relevant. So we try to pick out the most important stuff. We write it, we make videos about it, and we use Education Trench as a teaching portal for educators. Okay. And it started from passion and frustration, of course. The best way to start a new company is from frustration, because you're able to solve a problem. And we now get a lot of positive comments of teachers and unions and publishers who say, yeah, this is really exciting because it allows us to pick out the stuff we need and to focus on the educational thing we now do. So I think that education, teachers need to be educated in the future direction. And this is what we are trying to do. So next step we are trying to do right now, we are actually talking to a lot of people around the globe, people from Dubai, the US. We actually try to build a new training, which is a program that people can follow. And they're actually trained online by crazy specialists. So we try to build, as a following up of the current project, we try to build a program that teaches the teacher to become a future ready teacher. Yeah. But for now, there's thousands of articles, ebooks, videos in the platform. And it's a real honor to show that to those wonderful teachers around. I mean, there's a lot of industries that are really interesting, but I mean, education is the key to the economy of the world. You know, There's a guy I know, he's 11, he's crying every day because he's getting distracted at school because he's too smart. One of my nephews, he's 15, and they don't go to math class because they think mathematics is really, really boring. But they passed their exams because they were watching mathematics classes at YouTube. So I want to show the new ways of education. I think that's really interesting because children are really future oriented. So I think it's really nice.
Yeah. A lot to unpack there. And also, this is where our organization, has a lot in common with what you're trying to achieve here. One of the things that we see, because we basically have the same approach, I think, with the exception that we have more of a peer-to-peer approach, meaning that we show on TeachPitch tutorials whereby teachers share their experience in using specific technologies, and that review leads to whether it was a positive or a negative experience. But it's all the personal opinion of that specific teacher who's passionate in talking about the technology that proves whether it will have traction. And so that's crucial. And that also brings me to a challenge that we have seen often, is that the applicability of technology is a lot further away than where people would like it to be. Just going back to our conversation, earlier on, you basically said, I'm right with my predictions, but maybe not so much with the timeline. I think this specifically is also that we very often see in education. Loads of people are talking about VR, AR, and kind of all these, artificial intelligence, all these great new inventions that are coming, but they seem to, at glacial paces, seem to overtake education. And this is taking a lot longer than I think people anticipated and that people thought.
So at the same time, I met a guy in Rotterdam, and he's now working on VR for 5-6 years, and he's now getting loads of traction. So it takes time and patience. And I think we are able to speed up and do it more efficient if we collect global intelligence. Because, I know you guys are doing amazing things within the platform, within the community. But globally, there are so many people doing the same thing altogether. And we need to understand that education of the future is not about teaching, it's about experimenting.
Yeah.
And I think what all those teachers are doing within the community is trying out, and fail, and fail again, and try it out again. And that's actually what education should be.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why the platform you guys are using and having is really valuable. But at the same time, it's a limited number of people, and there's so much more around us. So I think the combination between what we do and what you guys are doing is pretty intelligent. But at the same time, it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, but it's the only way to get to know the future and to implement it.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, most definitely. I mean, it's not something you should give up on, but it's just an observation. The other thing I wanted to shed light on, and I think you're right there, is that specifically when it comes to the adoption of technology, the student can be leading, and the student can teach a lot more to the teacher than the teacher can. So the real innovator in the process, I think you're right in saying, well, actually that's the student, and let the student lead as to which technology should be used.
That the teacher should become an agent and
Correct.
Showing you the way, getting students together, show them where they can find the information. And that's absolutely true. The other thing I want to point out, if you're a commercial company and you fail with a product, you get bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
If a school fails, they don't get bankrupt.
Yeah.
So the stimulation of change is left. And the big question is, how could we actually build a stimulus like commercial company have it too? Because a lot of schools, they get their money every year and they get their stuff every year. They don't have to change because things are rolling anyway. It's so important to play and to fail.
Yeah. And what I mainly also wanted to say with the next generation, so the students, is that it's learning in parallel, so that the teacher often doesn't see. So the relationship is somewhat hierarchical because the learning goes from teacher to student.
Absolutely.
Now, specifically when it comes to the adoption of technology, it's actually a two-way street, right? So the teacher needs to be open that he or she will learn as much from the student as the other way around when it comes to technology. Now, that is a mind shift.
Yeah.
That is a mind shift that not many teachers are ready for. Yeah.
This is what we call reverse teaching. And I think it also applies to reverse mentoring. So if you have a school teacher or a school director, he should be assisted by a 25-year-old person next to him, steering the class, steering the organization. So actually accepting that a younger person knows better than you, that's a real mind shift. A lot of those teachers, I remember a discussion I had with a really young female. She was 32 and she was director of school. And then a 51-year-old teacher, they had a conversation. And then he said, "Hey, girlie, tell me, what are we going to do?" Oh. So he did not actually accept the young person in serious leadership. And I think that's something that should change too, because the older guys should learn from the younger people, right?
Yeah. This is a discussion that is going to take a lot longer than our 1 hour podcast interview. But as you said, you don't only need to look at education. There are society systems in place that have given more stature and given more rewards to the 50-year-old than to the 32-year-old. Equally so to the 30-year-old teacher and the 12-year-old student, because that's how our society has always operated, right? There needs to be the respect. There is the career development of teachers, them gaining certification, getting acknowledgement from the government. They're building their careers. So of course they want to look good. Everyone would want to look good in such a position. So, and this is also what we discussed at the World Innovation Summit for Education that just took place in December, whereby a lot of it was about, towards to teachers, like, don't take it personally. It can be a procedural way of teaching each other, right? Whereby once every week, for instance, a student gives feedback to the teacher on how things went in class, right? When has that ever happened?
What we usually do is we create groups of students and we ask them to prepare a specific lesson.
Yeah.
And then they will give the lesson to the other students. And I think this part, the big story here is mindset.
Yeah.
That means that new leadership, new teachership is actually that I mean, the older people are not automatically the people who have the best knowledge we need for the future. And I think it's more like a cultural aspect at this moment than technology.
Yeah.
I mean, from technology point, we can do everything, but it's actually people who should be able to change.
Yeah.
And then things will happen.
Yeah.
And that needs time if we have time, because we now see that companies build their own schools.
Yeah.
They say, wow, man, these children, they're not educated. So we build our own school. And I know 10 examples of companies. They now build their own schools with startups and different teachers who know better.
Mm.
And I think that's the reason why there should be an urgency.
Yeah, but that's not a bad thing, because they could potentially also teach others, right? Or why would it be a bad thing? Or is that not what you're saying?
What I mean is that there's a lot of schools that teach construction or agriculture, those specific schools.
Yeah.
And they don't teach the future employee. I mean, they teach the past. So, for example, in Holland, there's a huge Jumbo, which is a huge supermarket chain, and they built their own university because retail changes radically the coming years, and they don't get the people, so they need to teach them themselves.
Yeah.
So there's a big trend that parents, companies teach their own children. For example, my son, I teach him every Sunday. We do virtual reality gaming together, and we watch science fiction something on YouTube. He also watches TEDx talks every week, 1 or 2, because I, as a father, I want him to be educated about the future. And I think that's something that I also advise to parents. Yeah. If you want to teach your children about the future, you should do it partly yourself.
Yeah.
In order to protect, because we have robots at home, and he just got a hacking training. One of my friends, he works at the cyber crime team of the police, so he now knows how to hack. And I think these skills are really important, so we do it ourselves.
That's great, and such a great learning school. Being the son of a futurist, so he's in good hands in getting to know the future.
Confusing too.
a bit confusing. Yeah. Richard, thank you so much. We're almost at the end of this interview. But before I ask my 2 last questions, I just wanted to know what's next for Richard van Hooijdonk. What do you hope 2022 will bring?
I really want to scale up passion. So I want to scale up the passion. When I'm on stage, I try to show the passion I have for the world of tomorrow. And I want to scale it up. And we now have education trends. We will have HRM trends. There will be many platforms coming up. And my wish is that we are able to scale up the passion in order to change the mindset of a lot of people.
Okay.
And so that's where my heart is ticking right now.
And the scaling up goes via your talks and public appearances.
Digitally, VR, AR, using new technology to reach not 100 people, but or 10,000 or maybe 1 million. That's actually because there are a couple of futurists globally who have the power and the passion to change a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because it's not about technology, it's about mindset. And mindset can be pushed by digital concepts, like a podcast, like videos. And I think we need a new era of explainers. So my last wish is that a lot of people who watch my talks and who are watching talks of other speakers also become storytellers. And explainers. Because I love teachers. They are able to tell great stories. But do it more often. Do it digitally. Spread it around. Yeah. I think they're too humble. Humble.
So get vocal. If you're listening to this and you have great ideas about the future or specific ideas, then start sharing. That's your message.
Yeah. Could be the beginning of something bigger.
That's beautiful, Richard. And now my 2 last questions, and I asked them to all my guests on the podcast. Let's turn the tables. This is now your podcast, the Richard van Hooijdonk podcast. Who would you like to interview?
Yeah, I want to talk to a really passionate, powerful, but really frustrating teacher who has so many ideas, but is not able to get them into practice. Because I think there's a lot of those wonderful people. So this is what I want to do. So next interview will be with someone who has so many ideas and concepts around, maybe proven concepts, but has so many questions and ideas about exploring these concepts. So that's what I want to talk to. Second person I want to talk to is Putin, but my Russian is not really good.
Oh, so, okay.
So
If you're listening, either Putin or a teacher with many great ideas, but slightly frustrated that you cannot put them into practice, then give us a call, because we might want to interview you. Two very good suggestions. Why Putin, by the way? Why?
This guy, he's an intelligence guy. You know, he was working at the KGB. And as you know, one of my hobbies is the future of crime. And they have the best ever cybercrime organization in Russia. They have hundreds of thousands of people who have brilliant minds and knowledge at the wrong side of the line, actually. And I'm really curious. I've been in Moscow many times, I think 8 to 10 times. And I talked to government agencies a couple of times. One of them even hired me to do a talk 4 years ago. And I'm really inspired by Russia in general and about their secrets and how they exploit technology to organize chaos. So that's more like a personal interest thing. I expect that we will have a teacher calling you earlier than Putin, I think.
The chances are that you're right. But so one can always dream. So that's thanks for sharing that. And then the very last question: what would you recommend? What type of reading, or if there's a documentary that has inspired you, what would you want to recommend to our listeners to have a look at? Is there any content that has inspired you that you'd like to convey to others?
I think TEDx. I think TEDx is one of the most interesting channels because every week there are speakers about the future of education. But in the end, they tell a story. And a lot of those people, they influence the world. That's one. Secondly, I want everyone who's listening to build Inspirational Friday. That means that everyone will take a couple of hours free at Friday afternoon to talk with other teachers about the future. That means that every week you guys get together, agree on topics, and then a week later you guys present the future of education to each other within the organization. And if you do this, and we did it a lot of times, you see that there will be a kind of a passionate, innovational culture starting because people like to hear new things. So that's the second advice I want to give to people. Inspirational Education Friday.
Okay. So have a look at TEDx and think about the format of an Inspirational Friday to get inspired and to inspire each other. So you have a good look around and which, at what great content is out there. So you keep up to date on all the inspiring ideas converging. Richard van Hooijdonk, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas. You've taken us through the world of cybercrime, through the world of education, but also your own personal world of becoming a futurist. It's been a great pleasure having you. Come back anytime. We're going to need you as the future further evolves.
Thank you so much.
Richard van Hooijdonk. If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.